my wife came to me, this is how I know I married the right lady. She says, "You've always wanted to go to flight school. Why don't you quit your job and go do it?" I went through a Part 141 flight school, and I did my private instrument commercial, CFI, II, and added my multi-engine commercial in 102 days. So I basically went to school 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 months. So if you think about that, the CFI Academy was a month long. So I did private instrument commercial and multi-engine commercial in 2 months or 60 days. Some people have told me that's a record. I don't know if it is or not, but it was a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time orbiting the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I flew out of Addison at American Flyers, and they brought an airplane just for me to fly for that 2 months, and I had a lot of fun. It was a blast. So I was a high school principal, and I resigned my position and interviewed for a couple of different principal positions. Had 2 offers. Felt like that it was probably not a real good fit for me, so I turned them both down, and I wound up not getting a job in education that year. So I went to work selling cars, of all things. I did some consultant work for Denton ISD, and they called me one day when I was at the dealership and offered me a job, and so I accepted. Then my wife came to me, this is how I know I married the right lady. She says, "You've always wanted to go to flight school. Why don't you quit your job and go do it?" So we went to American Flyers and sat down with Mitch and had a conversation with him. And I said, "I've done the math." And he's like, kind of starting to smirk. And I said, "I've done the math. I believe that I can do all my ratings and get it done in about a 3-month time period because the math works out." And he looked at me and he says, "Well, we can do it." And I said, "If you can do it, I can do it." So I wrote him a check and we got started. And literally in that 3 months, the first week was part-time. I only went for a 4-hour block, 1 4-hour block a day. And then after that week, then it was 12 hours a day. It was 3 full 4-hour blocks. And I flew an average of probably, 5 hours a day. 6 hours a day, something like that. I don't really know. I never really went back to figure out what the average flying time per day was. I did my private in a couple of weeks and, just knocked it out. It's 35 flight hours and 35 classroom hours. And I think I finished with about 36 and a quarter hours on the private, and then all the rest of them were right at the 10th. Back then, when the rules were that you could use your check ride as part of your flight time, and so we'd save an hour and a half for the check ride, and then we'd go up and do what we need to do, and just make sure that we came back with that hour and a half, and literally just finished everything up right on the time, and did really really well with all the flying that I did. It was just. It was, like I said, I can't stress enough, it was just so much fun. I had to get it done before the school year started is what I had to do, because I knew that if I started working again, because teaching for me was a 10-hour day. It's just by the time you finished with this, you get there, you prep for the students come, you're with them all day long, they leave, and then you spend the next several hours wrapping up that day and getting ready for the next one. And it's just a total lifestyle teaching in public schools, if it's done right. And I like to think that I did it right. I knew that if I didn't get it done before school started, that I probably would never get it done. And so I had to push. And I set the goals. I had it all written out, exactly what I needed to do, step by step by step by step by step. I almost went into machine mode to make sure. In fact, there was one conversation I was having with one of the young flight instructors that I had, and he was really, really good. We were working on instruments at the time. And he said, "Yeah, we've had a really good day." And I looked at my watch and I looked back at him and I said, "Yeah, we got 2 hours to go." Because it was all about the time. So I'm one of these people that when I set a goal and really map out exactly what I need to do, I just go for it and I keep pushing until I get it done. and that's just kind of the way I'm wired. And so that story kind of fell into that conversation. It was kind of pretty hilarious because he looked at me with surprised eyes and he said, "Yeah, you're right. We do have 2 more hours because we were doing ground school at the time because it all counted." I had to have 35 hours of ground school and 35 hours of flight for that Instrument 141 program, and we were going to do it in this time frame, and I actually did it in 11 days. Never really thought about pushing myself because I was having too much fun. A 12-hour days at an airport was not a drag. It was not a drain. It was not a strain. It was just plain fun. That's all it was. And so I never really had those feelings. As far as the planning and the training went, it just went off like clockwork. I had these things to do. The curriculum was set up so well that one lesson just built on the next one. And since the lesson that I did was either that morning or at noon or that afternoon to the next day, the regression wasn't there. As a flight instructor, I've flown with a lot of students over the years, and when they fly once a week or once every 2 weeks, you spend most of that flight retraining what they learned on the last lesson so you can build. So the building blocks go up very, very slow. With me flying that much, it didn't do that. So I didn't really regress. Everything was truly a build on the next lesson. I probably would have never become a pilot. I wouldn't be the president of the board for Airplanes and Coffee. We wouldn't be throwing all these amazing fly-ins, or they may be happening without me. I don't know. I like to think I'm an integral part of Airplanes and Coffee's success. Not to take away from John Noggle at all, because he's the man. He's the marketing genius behind that thing's growth. But the day-to-day operations pretty much fall on me, or it has for the last 3 years. So I would have missed all of that. I never would have helped start the Tarrant County College's professional pilot program. That was something that I take a lot of pride in. I was a big part of that program kicking off. I was one of the first 3 instructors that taught there, and you met some amazing people that are predominantly all airline pilots now. But it's been a huge factor in my life, my adult life, because I started it so late in life, because I was in my 40s when I did it, in 2006, and I'm 62 now. So, you kind of do the math to figure where that falls. But so we're talking 18 years ago is when I did this. So I was not a young man by any stretch of the imagination. And, the ultimate goal, or the original goal, I think, was to go into the airlines. But when the opportunity came along financially, I just flat couldn't afford to do it, because they, offered me $28,000 a year to become a first officer at the regional airlines. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't pay the bills if I did that. I mean, that was barely enough to cover my house payment at the time. So I resigned to the fact that the airlines is not in my future. But we filled that void, that portion of my aspirations with just flying and teaching and Airplanes and Coffee in the last 3 years has really taken on a life of its own. You've got to set out the steps in order to be successful. And I like to think I was a successful principal, teacher, administrator. And it's really just the same. So if I'm going to go for a flight, I've got to plan that flight out so I know how to get from point A to point B, and figure out all the safety components of that flight in between, so that I arrive there in one piece, and on time and that sort of thing. And so it's really a matter of planning out everything you do in a pilot's world, in the principal world, and really anything I think that is successful. You've got to have a plan, and that plan had better be fairly detailed. Otherwise, you're just going to stumble through, and maybe you make it, maybe you don't. But if you know what you've got to do in order to do it, and you put those things in action, you'll probably reach your end goal. And I told my students this for years, and this is what I did, is I always ask myself at nights is, okay, what did I do today that detracted me from my goals? And then what did I do today that helped me achieve my goals? Your behavior from those two questions is to do less that detract you and do more that, help you get there. And therefore you start being more efficient in what you're trying to accomplish. And that's my secret. That's how I became a high school principal. That's how I became a pilot. And, that's how Airplanes and Coffee's grown.